course, there's a wisdom that the philosopher kings can bring that the other folks can't. And why is that?
Because they've been received this education, they've been free of all the other.
They've been out the caves.
And not just that, I think he also argues that they have the nature, they have the right nature and the right education.
Yeah, so so our next step is to go through these Platonic metaphors that are going to get to this issue of being of the right nature and all that. But I want to make sure, so there shouldn't be much confusion about this schema here, but this is really, I mean, if we're going to take those 10 chapters and kind of lay out what the central argument is and the central relationships are, they're basically sitting right there. Platonic metaphors. Ring of Gyges, that was the first one. Where was the Ring of Gyges? Where in the text was it? Do you remember? It was not in 3. Right, beginning of 2, right? Okay. Remember, I'm going to ask you to tell me where in the text this stuff is. So, and Brian, let's stick with you. What was the Ring of Gyges about? What was the story and what was the point of the story?
So I think there was this kind of common man who was a shepherd named Gyges, and he comes across a ring that enables him to be invisible, and so he's kind of given this unlimited freedom to do as he wishes. He can sleep with whoever he wants to sleep with, steal, and
which is obviously the neighbor. It's never in his own house, but that's another issue. He can just act with total license.
Yes. And so the question Plato brings up is, if you have this total license, I guess will you take advantage of it, or will that man make just decisions based on this freedom between, I guess, balance of good and bad? And he argues that no one can resist this temptation to act on your own accord.
So, I mean, if I could be a little more technical about this.
Okay.
The argument that was being used at this point by, I think, Glaucon was following up on Thrasymachus, is that the unhappy person is actually the unjust person is actually or potentially the most happy. So, Gyges gets this ring, which allows him to be unjust to the max. Right? Just to the maximum. Anything he wants to do, he can do because he can turn himself invisible. Okay? So he's the extreme case. But what this thing is supposed to prove is, hey, you can be a regular Joe shepherd, believe in all this virtue stuff and all that. But if you actually had the opportunity to be unjust, unjust people are active. Unjust people are more happy. And not only that, in the eyes of the unjust people, just people are fools. Right? So it's 2 pieces on there, right? Unjust people are more happy, just people are fools.
And I guess it addresses the point that Plato, I guess he made before, that justice should be for its own sake and not just for the kind of what comes with justice. And now this argument is about the only good thing about justice is the reputation it gives you. Mm-hmm. So this shepherd, he's just in that he's doing his own work, but then when given the opportunity not be just in the fundamental sense, he just goes to it.
Well, justice is not particularly compelling at this early stage in the way that they're talking about it. That people would want it and do it in and of itself. It has to be because of some external benefit that they get. Right? These are major challenges. That's why this is all happening in books 1 and 2. And it takes the next 8 books really to kind of deal with this.
There's also the idea that others will view the unjust as more just because they're able to provide more for their friends and family. Within this right?
I don't know that there would be a confusion between who's just and who's unjust. It seems to me like this is really an issue about happiness. And happy being the last word even of this text, and part of what we would visit again once we come back to the myth of birth. So this is really at least bringing out or problematizing or making us aware of the potential connection between justice, being just, and being happy. We still have to explain why if justice makes you unhappy or less happy, why would somebody want to do it?
I forget, but in the book, did Plato offer, or did Socrates offer a response to to the Ring of Gadgets initially, or did he wait till the myth of Ur to go some solution?
After this, he literally is like, man, this happiness question really is the question, and I'm going to come back to it. But the first thing I want to do is expand the scope and start talking. You know what I mean? So he did one of his classic. This is a great question. Before we can get into it, we got to get a couple other things clear. And so, and this is like we'll go through these lists. I think that's one of the reasons why when he comes back, the myth of Ur, we got Glaucon again, right? That's kind of his last, like, okay, coming back to your question, fine. Now that we've got all this other stuff in place, now I'm prepared to make the case that the just person is actually the happiest person, both in life and obviously in death. What about the myth of men and metals? Where did that come from? Where did that come from?
In this, Socrates basically said how.
Where did it come from? Where in the text?
I think either book 2 or 3.
Anybody just quickly want to help with that? Where in the text?
Just a question on that. If we had an alternative version of the text and we quote from it, is that okay? It's a little bit different wording.
Does yours have line numbers?
Yes.
Then, yeah, give me the line numbers.
Okay.
You see what I mean? Like the page numbers would be meaningless.
Okay, yeah, the line numbers, but if we quote from it.
That's fine, yeah, quote from it, but also give me the line number. Yeah, I mean, that's the most important thing. Yeah.
It's around 415, which is in book 3.
It's at the end of this, literally like the last couple pages of book 3, right? Yeah. Okay. So go ahead and tell me what it's about. Thanks, sir.
I think by this, he basically brings out the notion that how leaders not only have the gold medal in them, which makes them leader, but are also trained in a very specific and designed manner as leaders are supposed to be trained. Like the kind of education they receive, the kind of music they're allowed to hear, the kind of people they're allowed to follow. So the education is specific and they have the gold medal. These combined factors make them a good leader. I think that's what he's trying to say by myth of man and man.
Anybody else comment? Anybody else comment on? Everybody's clear about mythic metals. It's relatively, yeah, go ahead.
I think I addressed this earlier when we talked about it in class, but what I got out of the different metals thing is kind of also a purity argument in terms of gold is really inert metal, while the iron and stuff like that can be cast. So I got out of that it's not.
And why would that be important for this argument? For the argument that you're seeing roll out?
I related that to when Plato he talks about testing the guardians to see whether they'll be when put under any kind of influence, whether they will kind of yield. And iron is really easily malleable, but gold is not. So I saw that as kind of a relation with that analogy. And also that it's not just like their nature and their ability is important, but also their upbringing. Like both come together to make this ruling class what they are.
So some of this is about birth. Some of this is about signals about caste, warnings about mixture. You know what I mean? And even sometimes the benefits of having some mixture, right? But yeah. I mean, I think all that's good. Did you have something else?
Yeah, just something else on it. Just very briefly, the question of cosmology. Also in the discussion, as he's describing the myth of the metals, he discusses how to make people believe that, and how to make the generations after that.
Yeah. What's the purpose of that? I mean, why create the myth? Right. That's what this is. So getting people to believe. Why create that?
What he says is the most terrible and shameful thing of all is for a shepherd to rear dogs as auxiliaries to help him with his flocks in such a way that the evil. So he's scared of they have to guard in every way against auxiliaries becoming savage masters instead of kind of allies. So you have to identify who these strongest people are, and people aren't just going to accept that unless you tell them a story about why. So it gets at the question of not only how do we educate the best leaders, it also gets at a question. There's also an epistemological question there to a certain extent that we're discussing where does knowledge come from, and Socrates is actually discussing a specific method to manipulate the knowledge of the society, and I think that's also an interesting thing.
Ben, I think you raised this up during the conversation. Why? So is Socrates saying that this should be that rhetorical stuff should be done, or is he just saying people do it? Like, what's 'Cause I thought this was part of the part we ended.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what what have been your thoughts since?
So I was just surprised that Socrates, who's this big proponent of justice and
Yeah.
of being truthful, was proposing lying to all of us. Along with this idea.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and we'll come back to that when we deal with the myth of Ur again in this conversation too. So Kevin, keep your thoughts on that. I think as we roll through, there's going to be more clarity we can give on that. Dyed in wool, because that clearly relates to this. Yeah, go ahead.
It's basically Act 5,
Yeah.
and halfway through it.
Yeah.
And it talks about how when they dyers of wool, in order to dye wool, they have to select whitest wool first. And, basically start with blank, the natural blank, and then start dyeing it so that later on the dye won't get washed away. And that's basically an analogy to the way he wants to educate children. And children will be pure, and that way if you instill all these perfect morals into them, then they will be corruptible.
More on this?
Yeah. He also talks about the quality of the wool and how dye takes better to certain wool than others. And that the wool that the dye takes better to it absorbs more than the classic copy. And where you can hold the phosphor paint out and it goes down and down to the coarser wool from different classes.
So this supports the purity thing once again, which is you want to start with the best wool. If you start with the best wool, what's in this metaphor? What is the dye? It's the actual education. So if you start with the best wool, which by now we've determined, the best folks is the guardian class. If you're starting with the best wool, odds are the dye is going to stick a lot longer. Right? So it goes to your point about the incorruptibility and all that kind of stuff. But it's like you can educate anybody, right? We all have the capacity to be educated regardless of class. So that's kind of democratic in that sense. But this is a very aristocratic theory, right? But you should really spend your education dollar on the best because that's where it's going to stay. What book is this? Anybody want to help? I mean, Eldar, which book? Which book is this?
Oh, this is book 5.
One question I had in regards to that selection process. Say